Hello, my name is Christina Grozik, and I am part of the documentary called Going Om, which is an exploration into sound, vibration, frequency, and even silence. And you can check out more about the film if you're interested at goingomfilm.com. Again, goingomfilm.com. And because those topics are so important, we've decided to continue the discussions around them. And today, I am so excited to have this next guest with us. So today we have JP, Dr. Jean-Paul Amonte. So hello, Dr. Amonte, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Christina?
Good, good. It is so good to connect with you in this way. I know, I've heard your name and, I've seen your work, but we haven't connected face to face virtually yet. So it's really good to connect with you. And I'm really excited about sharing this time in this space with you. So thank you so much. I know your schedule is just really crazy, and you'll understand why here in a second when I list the many, many things. And I know this is just a snippet into your life, but you're a lead physician and instructor at the Edgar Cayce A.R.E., which for those of you that aren't familiar with the Edgar Cayce A.R.E., it is the Association of Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. You are a chiropractor, you're a hypnotherapist, you practice massage, you're a yogi, you work with therapeutic exercise, nutritional counseling, you're a triathlete, you're a musician, you're a longtime Edgar Cayce student, and that's just like a really small portion of the things that you do. And for those of you, I will just say this up front, and I will say it probably on the back end. You put out all of these amazing videos too, with all of these great tips and practices that we can use into our own life as a source for wellness. And I've watched a lot of your work, especially recently as we were getting closer to this date. And I love your style, I love your energy, your enthusiasm, and your passion for what you do, and just the way you present it. It makes it so easy to understand, and I so appreciate that. I think you did something on acid and alkaline and how to balance those. And I know that's not today's topic, but it was fascinating. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for all those kind words, and it's my pleasure. And like you said, all these things are really a passion of mine, and just today, and certainly in the current era, now more than ever, I mean, people really need all these alternatives to stay healthy, to stay well, and yeah, certainly to support, a lifestyle that just really enriches us, body, mind, and spirit. So yes, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with Edgar Cayce too, let's talk about Edgar Cayce for a moment. So Edgar Cayce is considered the father of holistic medicine. He's also considered the sleeping prophet. And can you tell us a little bit about Edgar Cayce and why he has those titles?
Absolutely. And so most people need to understand that when Edgar Cayce discovered this ability of his, the first patient he healed was himself, in fact. So growing up kind of in his early 20s, he had really terrible laryngitis. And so it was actually during a hypnotist presentation. And so the stage hypnotist, a guy named Laugh the Heart King Magician, would hypnotize people in front of the whole town. So this is in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, in the middle of the Bible Belt, the Midwest of America, back in just after the Civil War era. This is like early 19th century. And so essentially what happened is when Edgar Cayce went under hypnosis, his voice actually returned kind of normal. And there was a local doctor who just asked him, he's like, hey, what's wrong with you? Or what's the condition? And literally, Edgar Cayce described a circulatory condition in his vocal cords that was causing his laryngitis. And so then the doctor asked, well, how can we treat it? And he gave the treatment. And so when he kind of came out of, that kind of hypnotic state, he really wasn't aware of what he said. But when they applied the treatment, it worked. And so, in fact, this doctor named Al Lane was one of the first ones who, quote, discovered Edgar Cayce and would help him out with his most challenging cases. And sure enough, when he was in a very relaxed state, what most people would call kind of that first initial stage as you go into the dream state, so that brainwave consciousness, as a lot of people just kind of describe as almost intuitive. He just had this ability kind of while he was asleep, but his voice remained intact, that he could literally answer questions. So all he really needed to know was the person's name and exactly where they were at the time of the reading. And he could literally, like a computer hacker, kind of go into their system and literally read out what was going on with the body. And so when he started doing this, he really wasn't too sure about it until he really started to see all the results in the many people he helped. So, the background actually goes a little bit earlier in his lifetime. As a very young boy, he would often pray, he read a Bible, and actually he described at a very early age kind of having this visitation by what he described as an angel while he was praying. This angel asked him, "What would you like most?" And he says he wanted to help people, especially sick children. And so after that, he discovered he had this ability that if he read something and just went to sleep just for a few minutes, he could wake up and literally have a photographic image of it right in front of him. And so they tested this out. Even when he was 13, he memorized this 40-page congressional speech, woke up and gave it verbatim in front of the entire town. And so he really kind of got this lore and legend kind of growing up that really didn't help others until he was at this time about in his mid-20s. So after he helped himself and he was working with Dr. Al Lane, he really discovered he had something to this. And so he did over 14,000 documented readings, and over 8,000 of those were specifically for health and wellness. And so when Edgar Cayce would give a reading, again, all he had to know was the person's name and where they were. And literally he would go through and describe their circulation. He would describe their nerves. He would describe their organs, their glands, their muscles, their bones, literally the whole physical body. But then he would keep going, right? He would then talk about their spiritual ideals. He would talk about their mental attitudes. He would talk about their thoughts and whether or not they were living up to their the purpose of their higher self, so to speak. And for this reason, he's known as the father of holistic medicine, because he was really one of the first people that looked at the whole person. And it's still ahead of our time. You think about it, when was the last time you've been to a doctor who asked you about your spiritual ideals, your mental attitudes, and what are the thoughts and the stresses that are affecting your physical body? So yeah, that's why he's really known as the father of holistic medicine.
That's such a great explanation. Thank you so much for that. And I want to, I was like gushing when you were saying that stuff, because I want to get into a lot of the points that you touched on from your perspective here in a little bit, for sure, especially the thoughts, the words, the actions, and the spiritual component, and how everything is connected. Everything's connected. So always been fascinated with Edgar Cayce. Learned about him at a very young age. As soon as I saw a photo of him, and that's before I really knew a lot about him, I just felt a connection with him right away. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. So let's talk about Dr. Amonte, right, and your work and how you use sound and vibration and frequency in your work as a physician and an instructor.
Absolutely. So I first came to the A.R.E. when I was about 4.5 years old. My grandfather was the assistant vice president. And so I was literally a little kid running around the hills, climbing the trees. I went out to the summer camp and had a great time, great experience. But it wasn't until I was in college that I really began to not only get on this track, but really kind of have that sense of self-discovery. And so I was having multiple health challenges, knee and back issues, kind of the normal getting sick 2 or 3 times a year, kind of low energy sort of thing. And it was really the time I was going through college. You see, I was a pre-med student at Wake Forest University. I sat the MCAT exam. I was double majoring in biology, chemistry, pulling all-nighters for genetics, final exams, and so forth. And really all the while, having all these health issues, I ended up going to see an orthopedist, which is what I was in school to study. And needless to say, couldn't really help me out a whole lot. And at that time in my life, I was starting to really get bummed out, kind of had what I call a quarter life crisis. And that's when my family kind of reintroduced me to Edgar Cayce. And so they sent me a book, the book There Is a River, the biography by Tom Segru. And man, once I got about halfway through that, I couldn't put it down and never looked back. And I started to have all these epiphanies, all these awakenings to things, and literally spent the rest of my lifetime up until now becoming a Cayce doctor. There's no holistic medical school, right? So I had to start here at the Casey Riley School of Massage. Got my background and training in massage and the remedies. Then I furthered my degree in hypnosis, because I changed my degree from pre-med to psychology. And I actually took a minor in biochemistry and did undergraduate research in the body-mind connection. And we kept finding over and over again this idea of psychoneuroimmunology, that is how the thoughts affect the nervous system, affect the immune system. And what we really begin to find out is it's multifold, right? There's vibrations all around us. Our thoughts create vibrations, sounds create vibrations, other people's words and the environment we surround ourselves with, right? Our food has a vibration. And so all these things really influence our health. So at this point in my life, I began to change my diet, change my viewpoint on things, my perspectives, my exercise patterns, and all these things. And honestly, I've never felt better. And so really, after I got my hypnotherapy license, I was practicing as a massage therapist and a hypnotherapist, because I kept finding that a lot of people who had a lot of aches and pains or past traumas in their life, it really was helpful to combine the body work with the hypnosis. And then kind of the final piece was getting my doctorate. So I went to Palmer West in San Jose, California to become a doctor of chiropractic. So literally I had all the pieces, so to speak, to have a Cayce-based scope of practice. And so I would say that throughout every day, I use sound, I use vibration therapy in so many different ways, not only with my voice and just using a simple suggestion, just having a patient just kind of focus on their breath, feel that vibration, have them first begin every treatment by directing the mind into setting a good intention for their treatment. And immediately, as we just begin to visualize, we immediately begin to feel and the body begins to respond. And so according to Edgar Cayce, the highest developed vibration in the human is the voice, because our voice, right, can influence what people think, what people hear, what people can even smell, and what they can even feel. And so, right, it's not the words you say, but it's how you say it. And so not only through just suggestive therapy, but the music that I use in my practice is extremely important. So when somebody comes in and they're looking to relax and they're looking to heal, the music and the environment is quintessential to creating that sacred space. And so I would recommend for anyone looking to just have calm peace of mind, just that sacred space is so important. So I use typically healing frequencies, whether it's solfeggio, whether it's Baroque music, all different varieties in my practice. And of course, like you said, I'm a musician, right? So not only do I love music of all different forms and flavors, but certainly using it in my own practice, my own home, and so forth. So a lot of different ways that I use sound, and certainly to promote the healing process.
So yeah, thank you for that. And since we're on the topic of music, let me ask you about that now. So as a musician, like I knew all these other things, but I did not know you were a musician until recently, right? But you play so many different genres, and really like both ends of the spectrum kind of stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about the different genres you play and the different impacts that they may or may not have on you? Do different types of music make you feel different? Do they put you in a different space, or not so much?
Yeah, and so, to me, it's kind of like colors of the rainbow in terms of how it connects to emotional experiences, right? And so it just depends on not only whatever emotion you want to feel, whether it be calm or really energized, so to speak, or really maybe the current mood that you're in. So I first was introduced to playing music about the age, again, about 4 or 5 years old, because that's when I moved to Virginia Beach. My parents divorced, my mother and I came here. We lived with my grandparents. Of course, like I said, grandpa worked for Edgar Cayce, so I would hang around here. And my grandmother was a piano aficionado. She actually had a chance to go to Juilliard. She turned it down to actually work and support her family. But she taught many, many years, hundreds of students, and I became one of them. And so I was introduced to classical piano playing, and immediately I began to notice how it improved my focus and my concentration. that I really became very familiar and very appreciative of kind of the traditional roles of classical music, right? And so then when I got through primary school, I actually went from piano into brass instruments. So I played trumpet, baritone, even tried the tuba for a little bit. But then I got to French horn, and I really began to hone my skills as a French horn player all the way up through high school. In fact, I even auditioned for college scholarships, went into the marching band playing mellophone and so forth. And so I kept finding that, playing all these different classical genres, when I would be really focused in the music, I would oftentimes just kind of get lost. And I remember in several circumstances, like playing some of these tunes that were all of a sudden just evoking all this emotion. And almost like, you can feel that that emotion well up and your hair stands straight up and you kind of get, goose pimples and everything and so forth. And so I remember just really feeling that kind of wave of emotion. And I think as any musician would recognize, there's a big difference between playing somebody else's music and then writing your own. And so there I was in high school, playing French horn, doing the typical band thing with, symphonic classical pieces. All the while, I was really kind of a secret lover of percussion and drumming. And so one of my best friends, who now is a heavy metal rock star in California, was a bass violinist. And so I got my first drum kit, saving up all my extra spending money. He got his first bass guitar. We started playing together at the age of 13, 14. So then we ended up forming a high school rock band because that was our favorite music to play, right? So it was like hard rock, heavy metal, and then that just kept going. So after high school, I just kept with the drumming, and I got involved in bands when I was in college. Recorded some albums. I got a chance to tour around on the road a little bit. Played for jazz ensembles, played for traditional Irish bands, played marching in Scottish music and Scottish band. And so it's all just like different flavors, right? Like different spices in making a cuisine, or like I said, just different colors and different emotions. And when I really started writing, putting together my own music, it was like this direct connection to that heart center. And then, when you're on stage and you're performing it, and, especially when people start really responding and they're into the music that you wrote, I mean, it is an emotional energy like very else you can experience in life. And so, oftentimes when we're just rehearsing or practicing, whatever's going on in my daily life or whatever challenges might be happening emotionally, I can just use that as almost fuel, and I can just kind of put that in the music, and it just takes it to another level. And so to me, music, whether it's writing or playing or performing, it's all about that emotional connection. And so, like you said, the different genres are just like different emotional tapestries, whether we're kind of calm or whether we're cool playing jazz music, or, again, I think a lot of people need to realize it's okay to be angry. In fact, it's really healthy to channel that in a positive, healthy way. And so sometimes, some of those kind of rock, heavy metal tunes can do that, versus also very sad, and sometimes I remember, especially after my grandfather, when he passed away, the next several times I would perform, I just get really emotional. And literally it was like this healing tool to help me process that grief. And like I said, when you can just channel emotion into really whatever you're doing, it just takes it to the whole other level. And music certainly did that for me.
Yeah, well, that's really powerful. Thank you. And you're right. It's like, it's so incredible the people we've talked to, and when we ask them about their favorite sounds or their favorite songs or music. And we even talked with folks at the Rock Hall at Graceland, and just hearing the numbers of how many people come to those locations from all over the world and how much money they're spending to do so. It's because of a feeling that
That's right.
they had at some point based on this artist or musician, right? So it's incredible. It moves us. It's a very personal experience. I mean, music's like the timeline of my life. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, and think about that for a minute. Think about the unconscious memory connection. So as a psychologist, I became really fascinated in unconscious, or what we call implicit memory. And so you can hear a song, and without even thinking about it, like you said, it just takes you back in that timeline. It takes you back to that time period in your life, and all of a sudden you just get this well of nostalgia and memories. And I mean, I love that. And certainly, it's the power of sound, it's the power of music.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So let's go back to when you were talking about energy and the connection and the balancing of energy. So I understand that there is this device that, it's been said it can help balance the electrical structure of the body. It's called the Radiac Appliance, also known as the wet cell battery, also known as the radioactive appliance, which I don't think there's anything radioactive about it, but that was at one time, I think, the name. Supposedly, it can help to balance a
Yeah.
person's energy. But what I think is also interesting is some of the guidelines that have been attached to it. So, for example, I'll just give three. No alcohol at least 12 hours prior to the use of this device. That you need to have a positive mindset to use this advice, and no sharing with other people for this advice. It's a one-on-one experience. So I totally get these things, but can you tell us what this device is,
Yeah.
how to use it, and why we would have guidelines like this attached to it?
Absolutely. So let's go back and kind of define a little bit. In fact, since you asked, I actually brought an example of one here. And so this one is made by Bar Products. Dr. Bruce Barr, Baar, you can go to bar.com. He does a really good job making them. In fact, back in the day, I actually made, this isn't my personal one, this is one I demo with to patients and students, but I actually made mine by hand. So I can tell you about all the specs and literally what goes into making them. But this one is different than the wet cell. So in the Cayce readings, he would use vibrational healing a couple of different ways. So the Radiac Appliance, or as you pointed out earlier, is called radial active because it literally radially affects the whole body. And not that it's like radioactive that you actually glow. So this one is actually different than the wet cell. So the wet cell is like a liquid battery. It's a big tub that you pour chemicals. There's sulfuric acid. There's metal components that goes in. And basically what it does is it has two metal rods that goes in that. So that one is different than the Radiac Appliance because the wet cell actually produces a very low voltage just below that of a D battery. And oftentimes what would happen is you would take a solution jar, let's say it's gold or silver, camphor, iodine, iron, all these things, and vibrationally induce that into the body. So for example, gold and silver were used to rebuild the nervous system and the brain complex in certain cases like Parkinson's, ALS, and all these things. And now we found that those vibrational things are found in the gray and white matter, respectively, in the body. So if you're rebuilding the blood cells, you would use iron, right? Because that's the core of hemoglobin. Same thing if you're helping the glands, you would use iodine because that's required for your thyroid gland. We can certainly go on from there. Now you can also do that with the Radiac, but since you asked about the Radiac, you'll notice at the very top, it's got a red and a black input. And so you always hook the red wire first. And so essentially what these are attached to is a carbon steel rod. So imagine like a tuning fork, right? A carbon steel rod. There are two square flat plates. And what is inside of this is literally, it's housed and encased in graphite and carbon to basically create a closed structure that can resonate your body's energy. And then that is actually encased inside of a metal alloy so that other vibrations don't influence it. And so as you'll see here, there's a little red line. So what you do with this device is, first of all, you actually put it out in the sunlight to charge it for just a few minutes. And then you put it in an ice water bath right up to the line. Now you don't want to get the top wet, but you put it in ice because, as we know, cold reduces electrical resistance, right? And so by doing that, you actually reduce electrical resistance because this one, unlike the wet cell, does not produce a charge. Yeah, you will literally feel zero electrical activity. And so what you would do then is you always do the red wire first, and you would just simply connect that to one of your pulse points. So there are four. The two on your radial pulse and the two at the base of your ankles where your tibial pulse can be found. And so, for example, you would hook a plate with the red wire attached, for example, to the right wrist, hook that into the device, and you'd hook the black wire or the negative line to the opposite one. So you do like red wrist to your left ankle. Now, once you're connected, yes, it was advised to meditate, relax, and even visualize or focus on the healing energy that you want to produce. Now, the reason why only one person uses it because it literally tunes your vibrations. What most people don't understand is that your body is the most powerful electromagnetic field producer. And literally what it does, and it takes about 30 minutes to an hour, is it literally picks up your subtle energy like a tuning fork and kind of tunes it up, cleans it up, and then runs it back into your body. And it's, again, on a very, very subtle level. And so most people report feeling very relaxed, usually have insights if they're meditating. Dreams can certainly be more, you can remember them more, plus they can also be more vivid. It helps improve memory. It helps to improve your nervous system. It helps to improve blood flow, circulation, and all of these different things. And so that's why the Radiac was recommended for a variety of conditions. And so think about it. You know, what kind of vibration do you want to tune up in your body? One that of healthy, vibrant tissue. So as we know, alcohol reduces your vibration, right? It reduces your immune system. So hence why no alcohol, hence why you want to be in a positive, healthy vibrational state, and hence why only one person can use it, because it literally tunes to your body's energy. And once it picks up that signature, again, it'll literally tune you up. And so now if you think about it, it takes 4 days to do the entire body, right? So you would do like right wrist to left ankle. The second day you would do left wrist to right ankle. The next day you would do left ankle, right wrist, and so forth. So 4 days to go all the way around the body using the Radiac Appliance. And so that's the basic gist of how to use it. There's other devices too, like the violet ray that was invented by Nikola Tesla. I'm a huge Tesla fan. And so I've been doing a lot of experimentation with the violet ray device. As well as like UV lights and others. But yeah, the Radiac, certainly a worthwhile investment, I would say, for just about anybody.
Yeah, that is awesome. And thank you so much for the clarification on the difference between the Radiac and the wet cell battery. So I really appreciate that. But I've been looking into them, so I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
so maybe I'm in transition right now with studios. So maybe once I get settled at the new place, I will have to make that investment. But want to go, you talked about the power of positivity and, you know, just I think the absorption of energy and what that's like, right? Kind of that residual energy. Let's talk about words, thoughts, and actions. So how much power is in each of those? Because, you know, we're talking about vibration, we're talking about frequency, we're talking about energy. We've got things like placebo effects. And I am a firm believer that if you have hope, then you have so much. I think there's so much to be said for having hope in a situation. Over this past year personally, I'll tell you, I adopted and I even saw a plaque in the store and I'm like, yep, this is it. Every year there's kind of a new theme, right? And this was it for me personally this year. Faith over fear. And I think having and channeling your energy towards faith and believing something can change so quickly in your life, so quickly on both ends of the spectrum. If it can change this way, it can change back the other way, right? But it's having faith that it will do it. So how much power is in our thoughts, our words, our actions, and how may they affect our wellness?
Well, if you really consider that the only things we actually have control over is what we think, what we say, and what we do, that is literally all the power that we need to attract anything in our lives and our body. And so, again, understanding that the human body is an electromagnetic field producing machine. And now we've discovered, it's certainly much more than that. It's like this spiritual vehicle, so to speak, that, you know, the heart center actually has 10 times more of the electrical activity than your brain. It's more energy going from here up to here. And your heart has over 1,000 times the magnetic field force. And so we literally attract things into our energy field by what we're putting out there. And so the difference, though, is just the condensation of energy. So, for example, if you constantly think certain thoughts, it has, I would say, a certain power, but as soon as you vocalize that thought, as soon as you put it out there, it literally now manifests into the physical world, right? So you're taking literally this transformation of this thought mental energy and literally having it solidified into physical reality through the thoughts into your words. And then when you do something or build something or help someone, any of those actions, again, just solidify. It's why one of the most helpful tools is journaling. Because when we think about thoughts, we can say them to ourselves, but when we actually put it into words and actually manifest it into reality, it grounds that energy. And this is why people who journal and write down their intentions are much more likely to attract their desires and manifest what their intentions actually are. And so certainly with regards to health, if you actually state and write your goals out, you're certainly much more able to achieve them. And so not only just knowing what you need to do to be healthy and saying it, but then of course, doing it. That's really where the growth comes in. And so according to Edgar Cayce, he says, manifestation is where our growth comes. So as we manifest, as we actually do things, that's the most powerful influence. So we would definitely say thoughts to words, and then your deeds and your actions certainly have the strongest vibration. And most people would agree. It's not the words that someone says, but what they actually do. That at the end of the day is always a testament of who they are as a person, and are they really serious about doing these things. And so it's always a tricky thing, right? Because when we think about positive thinking and optimism and so forth, for most individuals and most people, it's usually just this thin layer of optimism that is kind of covering up a lot of other insecurities, fears, doubts, anxieties, past traumas and wounds. And so one of the most healthiest things we can do is to literally confront those fears. And I can share many examples of how I've done this, but trust me, I've got my own and I'm certainly working on them. But as we confront fear, we overcome it. And that's probably one of the greatest messages that all of us can do to heal really body, mind, and spirit. And so as we're able to literally transmute, or as the alchemists would say, transform those lower vibrations, because that's what's holding us back, is typically our fears, our worries, and anxieties. As you can shift that through your thought, your words, and your actual actions, it can literally become your secret weapon. Your greatest power, in terms of once you overcome that and you can really embrace and discover your own power within, really nothing's going to hold you back. And so when you really focus on healthy habits and really the kind of life that you desire, you have to look on all levels. You have to look at, okay, visualize that person right now that you want to become, and certainly accept where you are right now, but then look at what's the spiritual aspects, what's the emotional aspects, the mental, and of course the physical. And as long as you're able to address all of those things, thinking about it, visualizing it, by stating these things, writing them down, and then actually doing and performing these things in just simple little daily habits, with a bit of patience and persistence, we can definitely see a big difference over time. And I agree with you. This past year was actually, the past year and a half through COVID was one of my best years ever. And part of that was it really gave me the perfect chance to just kind of simplify everything down. During the quarantine, really got to get down to, okay, what's most important to me? And the simple fact that, the offices were closed, the schools were closed, but you could still go outside and exercise, right? And you were still able to be, at least here where I live, able to be outside in the parks as long as you were able to move and exercise. And that time I was able to really deeply reconnect with nature and get back into all those things that I do. And so establishing those healthy habits as we've reopened now has been absolutely life-changing. And I can share many different examples of that. But certainly that's the power of our thoughts, words, and deeds.
I love that. I love the way you said that. And I also love the fact that you talked about resistance and, facing that to work through it, because I think we know that whatever you are putting your energy in, whether it's resisting something and pushing it away, it just grows stronger and comes at you stronger, right? Until you're ready to face it. And the journaling aspect too that you had mentioned, it's funny because I taught at Kent State University, and I taught media writing, and then I also taught screenwriting. And for probably the first 3 weeks, the students are like, why are we what is this? Why are we doing this? But I would have them do mindful exercises and journaling. Yeah. And I told them, the reason you may not get this now, but you will when the time is right. Because if you're putting content into the world,
yes,
right? You should be responsible for the content that you're willing to put into the world, because every opportunity, every thought, every action, you have the choice to co-create, right? And what we're putting out there is a co-creation with everything else. So it's, I think when we can think in terms of that, then maybe we're more mindful with what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're acting, and
Sure.
the world we want to see around us.
Yeah, and think about how that influences other people. The vibrations we're constantly giving out. I mean, how many times have all of us experienced, let's say we go into a group of people or around someone and you can pick up their vibration, just, sometimes without even them saying anything. And so, yeah, so we're definitely co-creating all of this together. And I think the most important thing for all of us to realize is that we have the ability to really co-create kind of anything that we desire. And so I think now more than ever, it is extremely important for everyone to really go deep within themselves, discover who they are, and reclaim your power and understand that, you completely have vibrational influence over your environment and certainly over yourself. And how many times do we realize, like, oh my goodness, like maybe this environment or relationship or a situation creating all this negative vibration in our lives, just changing that can honestly create a completely new, different, healthy lifestyle, completely new, healthy patterns. And we've seen it throughout tons of research. If you take any cell and you put it in a healthy environment, you give it all the nutrients that it needs, that cell literally turns over with zero signs of aging or degeneration. But as soon as you put it in a toxic environment or any negative sort of vibrations, even sounds, right? Immediately it starts to degrade and kind of show this wear and tear, what we might call dis-ease or out of that balance. But that ultimately is the idea, is finding our balance and finding that state of ease.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And what you had said, in the sound healing community, we have a saying that your energy speaks before you say a word.
Yeah.
There's so much that you can just tell when you're paying attention and you're present. So let me ask you this, in terms of what we were just talking about. So ideally, if you could say, okay, well, this person, every time I'm around them, I'm feeling that I have this drop in energy and I just feel drained. Or an environment. I know that Kevin Todeschi has spoken about the pearl necklace several times, and the woman that would wear the pearl necklace and then she would go into these states of depression. And Edgar Cayce said that, stop wearing the pearl necklace. It's the energy of the necklace is what's bringing you down, right? Or Eckhart Tolle said that he needed to go to a certain area to write one of his books because of the energy there. And, I can definitely, when I walk into a room or even a city sometimes it's like, oh, I'm resonating and just beaming. And then other times I'm like, I need to prepare myself because there's this heaviness just in the air there, an energetic heaviness, right? So in an ideal world, we would say, okay, well, this city doesn't work for me. Maybe this job doesn't work for me, or my coworker or my family member, that every time I say, like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, ugh. And it's that person every time, and you're like, okay, so what's good and new, because you're like, oh, where are you going to go there, right? So when we're in those situations, then what are some tips that you may have for ways that we can stay positive and keep our energetic, like, body, like, high, right? Versus letting the energies around us influence us when it's a situation that we have to go to work, right? And sometimes you always have that person in your life that you're like, I need detox right now. So, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Totally. Well, and therein lies the challenge, right? Because it's like this beautiful balance between the energy of your environment, but also the energy of yourself. And so if you know that you're going to go into an environment that might be stressful, potentially toxic energy, the best thing to do is ground your energy. Literally, research has shown just stand barefoot on the ground for 10 minutes. It can literally ground your electromagnetic field. Oftentimes doing things that bring you joy beforehand. So like listening to your favorite songs. If you're able to at work, maybe have a quiet little headpiece so you can have those nice, relaxing, calm vibrations. So if you get yourself in a calm, grounded, relaxed state, you can certainly use your Radiac Appliance too. Notice it's always easier to interact with those individuals. And of course, the number one thing is right sleep. The basic things of good food, good sleep, good exercise go a long way. So if you're already in a relaxed state, and probably all of us have realized that sometimes you're like, woo, nothing can get me down. Versus in other ones, like if you're not well rested, if the mind's wavering, it does not take much to just tip that balance and kind of throw us into a spin. So the best thing we can always do is ground our energy first and make sure we're in a healthy, balanced place. Now, the other part, of course, is choosing who you interact with and how far you take that interaction. And so there's a very simple meditation that I often do when I know I'm going to situations where literally I'll either stand barefoot on the ground or just find a calm space. I'll use a simple mantra of A.R.E, and I'll just close my eyes and I just focus on my heart center, right? And I just focus here, I breathe through it, and then I focus on a positive, loving feeling, a memory of when I either felt really loved or when I shared that with somebody else. And then what I'll do is kind of hold that until I kind of feel that move throughout my entire body. And then I just feel like turning up a dimmer switch. You know how you really crank the lights up in a room? Well, I imagine I'm really cranking up this warm white light energy field all around me. So strong that it can literally dissolve any negative energy to the point that I can literally, like a force field, I can kind of choose what I bring into my energy or not. So even if I'm interacting with someone who's just maybe not on the same vibrational level, it's all good because I can just recognize that point. And most people, I think, would call this setting healthy boundaries, right? And so realizing that boundaries are so healthy to have in life, everyone. Physical boundaries, but also mental, emotional boundaries. And again, once we start to really reclaim our power, you kind of realize, hey, I have a choice here of whose energies and what emotions I'm going to choose to feel based on what energy this person is presenting. Now, granted, if it's kind of relentless, if it's your boss, your coworker, you kind of have to pick your battles and and set your boundaries. But what I've often found is that when we can just continually stay positive in those things and say, hey, yeah, so on and so forth, and you can just offer maybe helpful suggestions or loving, or just even empathize and just show them, as the Dalai Lama would say, just compassion, right? Oftentimes you'll see their energy shift and change too, right? Because that's the power of vibration. And that's the power of being truly heart-centered and balanced in that state, is you can actually measure the electromagnetic field difference in the person's heart waves and their brain waves. I mean, you go to heartmath.org. The HeartMath Institute has pioneered all of this research in vibrational medicine, much like Cayce talked about almost 100 years ago. And so you can actually influence the field or energy of that individual. And if not, then you have the choice of whether you want to, as Eckhart Tolle would say, accept it, change it, or reject it, And so, yeah, I think a lot of people, if you really start to listen to these signs and really pay attention to yourself and you keep getting the same thing over and over again, maybe it's time to change careers, maybe it's time to change relationships, or maybe just move your desk over here, away from this person might make all the difference in the world. And so there's things we can do to prepare ourselves and ground our energy and really hold on to that positive kind of heartfelt focus. But then also realize too is when you need to change, it's time to change. And that's the power of that choice.
Yeah, I love that and I appreciate that very much. And going back to what you were saying about creating that light within, whether I'm doing a guided meditation or working with the sound aspect, it's one of the things I do at the end. And I have had people say to me after, did you turn a light on at that time when we were doing that? Because I really felt like there was this light above me. And I'm like, no, I didn't, But I think there's when you can really practice, and I think all of this is a daily practice. It's a practice. It's a practice. The words we use, the thoughts, all of it is a practice, constant, right? But like you had said too, even in those moments, because everyone's going through life and we all handle it maybe a little bit differently, but just showing kindness and compassion to those people that are in our path that could be challenging, right? Especially if we haven't had a lot of sleep that night. So just always show kindness and compassion, because ultimately that will help to raise the vibration of the folks around us, right? Because you never know what someone's going through.
You never do. And, that compassion and kindness, also needs to be reflected on ourselves. So, if you have that day, if you have that, vibrational thing, then make sure at the end, we all need to take time to then ground ourselves and give ourselves that compassion to kind of, refill that vessel within. Absolutely.
Mm. Yeah, JP, that's like a reminder that constantly need, right? So
Right.
thank you for that. And I think so many of us, we have a tendency to try to help others, and then often our cup runs very low, and then it's hard. It's hard to do that, kind of like the airplane mask situation with oxygen. So let's switch over to silence and listening. So early on, I had heard a Cayce quote, and it penetrated my soul when I heard this. It was just like, yes, yes. Through prayer, we speak to God, and God can be the source, the universe, the spirit, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
Through prayer, we speak to God, and in meditation, God speaks to us. So, how important is silence, and what are some ways that we can find silence within?
Well, prayer and meditation, I'm so glad that you brought this up because this is probably one of the cornerstone of Cayce's healing recommendations. And so Edgar Cayce mentioned meditation over 1,700 times. So over 1,700 of those readings. And in fact, it's his number one recommendation. Out of all the health tips that he gave between massage or diet and so forth, meditation is number one. And he described meditation just like you described, as when we quiet ourselves, we can literally receive a phone call, versus prayer is like putting that phone call out. So it's like, prayer meditation is like two sides of that coin, two sides of giving out information, be prayer, and then receiving it. And so I think anyone who has a spiritual practice immediately recognizes just the transcendence of meditation. Think about the original quote, be still and then know that I am God. And so this idea that life in its essence is movement, right? But we can find that stillness. And especially when we can slow everything down for just that moment. What essentially happens is the mind, rather than going from here to there, becomes present. And so stillness is ultimately about becoming present. And so realize, everyone, that we all have a choice of whether or not we want to pay attention and interact with the mind thought chatter that's happening within all of us. And it's just like there's this dialogue going on within, and realizing that you're not that dialogue. You're not even the thoughts. You're the person who's listening to it. And for me, was really practicing yoga on a regular basis, and practicing meditation, prayer, and all these things, that you kind of begin to step out of the flow of those thoughts, and you kind of begin to awaken to the fact that you are the observer. And as you do that, all of a sudden you kind of find this quiet space in between those thoughts. And that is the magic of meditation. And so just practicing stillness, just even slowing the mind down just to be empty for just a moment. That was the lesson of the Buddha, right? Is to be empty, full of emptiness, so to speak. And in doing so, that's how they connect to source. Or even think about in our modern context, for example, like Jedi, always comes down to stilling the mind to feel the force. And so even throughout yogic training, right? Even throughout all the monks of Christian and Judaic tradition, every single one of them has a practice of stillness and being quiet to kind of reform that connection within ourselves to the divine. And the best way to practice that is to simply setting aside time, especially when you notice in the rhythm of your day when you really need it. So for most of us, this might be first thing in the morning. Before you even begin your day, it's just first quieting the mind. The easiest way to do that is the breath. So I can't say enough about the healing power of breath work. I've tried just about every form of breath work I found. I kind of have my own version now, and I teach it to all of my students and certainly many of my patients. And so the quickest way to control your thoughts is just focus on your breath. And so right now, if you just breathe in and just open and accept everything that's coming in, exhale, let it all go. And after a while, just after a few breaths, all of a sudden at the end of the exhalation, you might find that little quiet moment of peace. And as you practice that, that moment gets larger and larger and larger. And eventually you kind of realize that this stillness can pervade into anything that you're doing, whether it's running on the trails, whether it's working, it's going to work or working with another individual, but especially when you can just sit still and quiet the mind and find that calm space in between your breath. What you're going to find is this, that in that space, you now have the opportunity to listen to that very quiet, still, loving voice within yourself. Not the loud one that's chattering all the time and probably telling you that you're not good enough or you should be doing this. What are you doing sitting around? That's not the voice we're talking about here. We're talking about the voice that just loves you, unconditionally loves you. And the part of you that's always looking out for your highest self. Now, if you've never met this part, it'd be a very good idea. Just take some time tonight, sit down, and just reconnect to that. And then in that stillness, in that quiet moment, all of a sudden, like a little whisper or like a gentle nudge, you might get an idea, right? And so Cayce would often say, before you meditate, set your ideal. That is, what is your intention? What is the mission statement from the highest part of yourself? If you really truly know what your soul's purpose is, connect to that. And then once you have that ideal, then empty everything out. You can use your breath. You can just let go of everything in the day, any worries, any challenges, any problems, just let it go. And he literally described how, you just empty out yourself, and he would describe the energy centers and the chakras way before anybody even knew about chakras. And he literally had this method of starting at the base chakra, right around your tailbone and your sacrum, and just literally relaxing all of these areas, moving all the way up. And he'd say just begin to feel that energy rise. And he's describing that Kundalini energy, right? That's almost healing, creative aspect. And he says, just feel it move all the way up from the lower centers, all the way up, he would say, into the brain, the center, the eye that is single in purpose. And of course, what's he talking about? Yeah, the pineal gland. And he's talking about raising that vibration all the way up to the pineal pituitary centers. And we described as this movement, the circulatory movement of energy. And that once you kind of find that connection, and then you enter into that stillness, he describes it almost like this divine sacred temple, like a secret chamber within yourself. And as we practice moving into that space, is where he would say, literally, you become your own psychic. You become your own intuitive. And this gentle, loving, quiet little voice will then begin to help guide you. And the more that you can listen to this, the more you're going to find it's going to kind of guide you throughout every single day. And that's when we really can awaken to that intuitive aspect of ourselves, is sitting in those moments of stillness and quietness. And all of a sudden, when everything seems to come back to that feeling of balance, right again, then it's always best for us to kind of open our eyes and then interact with our life and then face our challenges. And I assure you, you'll have a very different perspective if you're coming from that place.
That is such great advice, and that was beautiful the way you presented that, truly. So, I believe that everyone has the answers that they need for their entire journey on life. It may not be what they want, but it will be what they need. And it's quieting, it's getting that connection within yourself to the divine. And then when we find that harmony and that balance within and that connection with the above, right? Then we actually see ourselves and everyone else. You see that connection, that in knowing, it's all connected. It is, everything is connection. And when you can see and understand things through energy, and we're having this human experience, right? It all changes. It all changes. And you see the miraculous in every single day through something. So speaking on wholeness and oneness, what did Edgar Cayce have to say about oneness?
He had a lot to say about it. And in fact, probably one of my favorite quotes comes out of a long series of readings. And so it's reading 900-429. So the 429th reading that this individual received. And for anyone who knows the history, it was one of the wealthy stockbrokers that poured his money into Cayce and actually helped build this hospital building that I'm actually coming to you live from here. And the question was this. This individual asked Edgar Cayce, if we were to build a spiritually based school with a spiritually based education, what would be the lesson or the lecture, and what should we teach? And immediately the advice was the first lesson for 6 months should be oneness. He pauses and he says it again, oneness. And he says it again, oneness. He says, teach the oneness of God. Teach the oneness of man's relation. Teach the oneness of all force. Teach the oneness of all time. If you can wrap your head around that. He said, teach the oneness in every effort, oneness, oneness. And so literally, for any spiritual understanding, and think about it, 6 months, I mean, that's longer than your typical college semester. And in this college, the only lesson you would get for the first 6 months is understanding oneness literally on every level. But it goes so much further beyond that. If you consider what true health is from the holistic perspective, it's not just having a healthy physical, healthy mind, emotion, and spirit, but it's all of them coordinating together. It's when you can connect what you're doing physically with mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and they're all one and connected. He says that's when you're whole. He says that's where true healing takes place. He says healing, whether or not you use surgery, whether or not you use drugs or castor oil or meditation, he says ultimately is the reattunement at the atomic structure. So he's talking literally quantum physics back in the day. He says you reattune that atomic vibrational frequency back to its spiritual origin, or he would say the spiritual heritage. And literally when every cell, every atom of every cell and every part of your being is synchronized and harmonized, or dare should we say tuned, like a harp or a finely played instrument, when you are literally tuned up, every vibrational part of your cell, to your mind, to your thoughts, to your spirit, anything can happen. And right, think about all the cases of faith healing or placebo healing or these miracle cures that happen. Well, anything is possible when you attune vibration to that oneness of the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And that's body, mind, spirit, holistic healing 101. And so, we could certainly go in great depth and detail, but anyone who wants to experience profound healing, it all comes down to having oneness throughout every part of your being. And most importantly, now applying that. Because literally, if you think about it, if you really understood the concept that we are all one experiencing life subjectively, and you really embrace that and you live that, how could you raise your words or raise a fist, let alone a weapon, at another human being? Because you would ultimately know you're only hurting yourself if you have the idea of oneness. And I'll share one last quote, which is this. Remember around 2012, when everyone was really concerned about the Mayan calendar and what was going to happen? We were inundated with phone calls here at the A.R.E. about what did Edgar Cayce say about 2012? How many readings about 2012? And there were 0 readings about 2012. And in fact, what he did say was this. He says, the grand awakening will happen on the planetary earthly realm at the certain point in time when the collective energies of all the people and their frequencies actually create that shift. So he said there's not a specific date, but it's all of our intentions and our choices. But he did say it would be hallmarked by 3 things. Number 1, that we would see ourselves as one species. There would be a unified view of consciousness. We wouldn't see ourselves as different countries competing, or different states even competing with one country. We would say we see ourselves as one human family, number 1. Number 2, he says there will be a spiritual consciousness like never before seen. And number 3, he's described there would be a very strong emphasis on purity. Now, what he exactly meant by that, maybe we're not sure. It's certainly subject to interpretation. But certainly, my opinion would be the purity of our food, of our water, of our thoughts, of our words, of our actions, how we treat each other. And not to say, in the sense that, purity is, in terms of like like Puritans or anything like that. But literally just how we approach things would be just very clean, very healthy, so to speak. But that literally is going to be the hallmarks as we enter into this new age, this Aquarian, fifth dimensional or even more essence, that we all see ourselves as one. We all have a spiritual understanding, a new spiritual consciousness, and certainly our approach to our bodies, our environment, and each other comes from a very pure place. And he says, when all those things happen, then you're going to see this revolution.
I feel like we may have a part two to this just on that topic at
Sure.
another date. Yeah, but it's such an interesting time right now on
Yes.
so many levels, and I know we could really get into a completely different discussion on that, and maybe we can at another point.
I'd
Um,
love to.
but yeah, that would be great. I would love that for sure. So, but those are really really good tips and great insight and quotes. So thank you for sharing that so much. Um, Let me ask you this: what
Yeah.
are some of your favorite sounds?
Yeah, so some of my favorite sounds, first of all, is just using the voice with simple mantras. And so one thing that I very frequently do is just softly singing to myself, or singing maybe my favorite songs, or just again using like A.R.E. or those kind of things. Um, I have to admit, one of my favorite sounds is that of nature. I think, just the sounds of birds, of animals, of crickets. There's something harmonizing that about the sounds that nature produces. It's almost like this carpet, this canopy, so to speak, around Earth. And so, just being immersed in nature, just hearing those sounds, always is healing for me. And so it's like just feeling the vibration of the earth, feeling the energy of the sun, the water, but life force, the sound of life has to be one of the most connecting, healing aspects. And so that's probably my go-to right there. And so just the sound of water and the waves, literally living at the ocean. One of my favorite happy places is just standing and just hearing the sound of the waves. And I know many other people too. Just the sound of water, just the sound of the rainstorm, just the sounds of nature herself are extremely healing. Now from there, I do have a passion for certain bands, for certain types of music and sound, again, depending on the mood I'm in. I certainly have my own playlist that I love to tap into certain music, certainly ones that make me want to dance and move. So that's definitely my favorite. Definitely another one that comes right to my mind. Actually, the first thing I thought about was hearing my son laughing. And so, there throughout many different, spiritual contexts, there's always this emphasis on the joyous, the exuberance, joy, and the innocence of children. And I think everyone can recognize and resonate with that. When a child, an infant, is in a joyous state and laughing, immediately is infectious to anyone in the room or around it. And so, especially when you hear that kind of joyous laughter, probably one of the best, maybe one of the most healing sounds that I can think about. I mean, talk about tuning forks, right? When one resonates and the other one picks it right up. So even if I'm having a bad day, if or not even a bad day, if I'm having a challenging day and I'm in a certain mood, and it doesn't even matter if my son's playing and he's laughing, immediately just cuts right through, and I just reawaken, so to speak, to that. And so, as I said before, being a drummer, just the sounds of percussion and the rhythm and being able to create. I love that. And so one of my favorite things, of course, especially with, all the things going on, is literally just to play, and just creating sounds can be extremely healing too. So in all those different ways, I would say we can certainly keep going on, but those are my top.
Love it. I love that you've tapped into all of those different areas and options, and I think it's so interesting because as a musician, right, it's interesting to watch performers on a stage because they're so present, and as the audience member, you find that presence too. You're not thinking about anything else. It's just amazing in that moment to share presence in that time, a specific moment in time where you're both actively present, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. What great sounds. And I love that you said the sound of life. So
Yeah.
good. The sound of life. Because, yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Never thought of it that way. So thank you for that, for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more question because I know you've already put in a long day, and every day is a long day right now with you. So, I want to honor and respect your time here for sure. So let me ask you maybe one more question. Where do you think, or how do you think sound will be used in the future?
Well, I think we're already kind of seeing it now, but I think it's kind of making its ways more into the mainstream. So let's kind of open some rabbit holes here, and maybe we can pick up with another discussion later on. We'll do a little part two if you're interested. But we can already see how when you can tap into certain vibrational frequencies, you can literally shift the behavior of cells. You can literally measure the difference in frequency of heart waves and brain waves and so forth. And so I think we're already seeing people use sound in certain healing frequencies just to lift their mood, just to feel better. There's tons of evidence now that if you can tap into certain frequencies, you can literally reconnect brain. Brain firing patterns, you can awaken memories and so forth. And I'll give you one quick example. I had a patient losing memory from Alzheimer's. And he was really uncomfortable coming to the office because obviously his partner had to come with him, and he really could not remember anything day to day. He could never remember by name. He could never remember what month or what day and so forth. I mean, it was really advanced, but he was always singing, you see. And what I soon discovered is he had been a vocalist. He loved the opera, grew up with it, and he was singing these old Italian operas. And sure enough, his family was from Sicily. And so he was kind of remembering one of the operas that was usually sung. And it was, I'll never forget, it was the Una Furtiva Lacrima. I was coming singing this opera. So I kind of recognized it. And a few treatments in, I would start playing it. So like I said, music is very important in my treatment room. And so I would start playing that opera, and he would come in, oh, and immediately he felt at peace. He felt calmer. And more importantly, I would ask him like what he could remember, and he would start telling me all these memories of his childhood and growing up, like the memories that were still intact. And as we did that, sure enough, his memory would just slightly improve, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a few days. And so we can definitely see the benefit of using sound, song to awaken memories, to fire those brain neurological patterns. So maybe this can be used to heal neurological disease. Maybe it can be used with all the concern of dementia and Alzheimer's. That's certainly one tool. But people have to recognize that sound creates a force, and you can even see tools now where you can put fires out with using sound frequencies, and then they can blast fires by using sound at it. The same thing they're using to disperse crowds. Most people aren't aware of this, but rather than using like tear gas and so forth, you can actually use intense sound, literally that's so barraging that nobody wants to hear it. So literally it can help disperse crowds peacefully. And certainly with regards to, and I'm going to drop this one. So back in the day when I was studying vibrations, there's a book called The Source Field Investigations that looked at sound frequencies that were used by the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Tibetan monks. And they were trying to discover how the heck they built these very elaborate, huge monasteries at the top of seemingly impossible mountaintops. Like, how the heck did they get these large stones and all this equipment and supplies up? And of course, most people are familiar that Tibetans, they use sound and mantras. That's one of my favorites. If you've ever heard a room of these monks chanting, it will literally take you to another planet. Certainly, that's what they use it for, right? Is the advancement of consciousness. But it actually turns out that they would use certain sound frequencies and tones and vibrations to literally float things up that literally would counteract the effect of gravity. And so if you really think about that, it means that we literally have the ability to use sound as a physical form of force and buoyancy, much like the Archimedes principle of giving force and buoyancy to literally start to move things. So could you imagine using sound and magnetic levitation in terms of architectural design? You can use it in terms of healing. You can use it in terms of forces to be safe and put out fires, but also help to maybe even control crowds, right? And so could you imagine if they had like sound disbursement, there at the doors of the Capitol on January 6th, maybe it would have turned out quite differently. So I think all of these technologies are present, but I think they're just coming more and more into the mainstream. And I mean, I personally believe as we kind of awaken to all of the forces and the physics of sound, it's literally going to be part of the revolutionizing as we head into the new age.
Yeah, you covered so many different areas, and each of them are fascinating in their own way. You got me with the opera guy, though. That, yeah, I could feel that, right? So, but how beautiful was that for sure? And I mean, when you look at the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, and recently we've seen other examples of that using sound waves, and people are feeling sick, and you kind of touched on that as maybe a weapon, or even at Standing Rock with the crowds that they had and how they used the sound waves there to disperse the crowd. So many different ways that we can be using this. And I love the way that you referenced the fire, putting out the fire. And if you have not seen that video, you can go online, you can Google it. It's there. It is the coolest thing. You're just going to be in awe of it. And then the structures and moving structures and using that as a form of architecture, I think there's so many possibilities. Hopefully we will use them for the advancement in the most positive, loving manner, for sure. So Dr. Amonte, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Well, just in general that, everyone has to eventually at some point come to terms with who they are and where their place is in life. And probably one of the most common thing that I'm hearing in the current era is just, the stress and all the changes and all the upheavals that are certainly happening around us, is people feeling kind of lost or kind of not sure what to do. And so I recommend to everyone, take time for yourself. All this energy that you're pouring and putting into other things, just focus those vibrations on yourself and surround yourself with healing sounds, surround yourself with healing thoughts, with good positive words, and certainly the actions and everything that you do can make a difference. And as we continually put that out there, we're literally going to continue to awaken to our own power. And as you do so, as all of us do so, you're going to literally help give permission to all the people that you're around to also find themselves, find their soul's purpose, and really find their own power. And so sound, music, all of these vibrational things we've talked about literally helps us to awaken that power to realize we can make a difference, not only to ourselves, but to also everyone around us. And we can literally help change the world through the vibrations that we put out there. And so when you really understand this and you really begin to embrace this, there's this natural transformation that occurs, as opposed to, oh my goodness, all these things affected me. You can just flip the switch, and instead of thinking about how am I feeling, instead it's how do I want to feel? And how can I now shift that vibration and use that to literally influence everything else around? And so I think as more and more of us kind of recognize and awaken to that inner ability, and as we shift that, we're eventually going to inevitably reach this tipping point where then we literally begin to see these big shifts and changes and a more perhaps compassionate, more healing, more oneness, throughout our planet and out our world. And certainly with regards to singing one song. So I would definitely say, in conclusion, you have to understand that everything in this entire universe is sound and vibration. I mean, literally, the word universe literally means one song, right? Universe. And so we are literally all humming and all vibrating this one grand symphony. And now you have to figure out, what is your part to play? You have this musical instrument, this divine tool that you call a body. And if you can tune that up, right? Your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, tune yourself up like the maestro playing a perfectly tuned instrument. And then as you join into the symphony of the universe, you'll absolutely find your part. You'll absolutely realize you're not alone. In fact, there are many, many, many of other people of us of like mind and of like vibration. And then you can literally brace into that community, weave yourself into that, and literally awaken to your soul's purpose. And once you fulfill that and you can manifest that, that's why we're all here, is that process of self-discovery and that process of actually creating that difference and manifesting what we have on the spiritual level into that physical reality. And as long as all those things keep one and in harmony, that is how we create the world that we truly want to live in. So thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was wonderful meeting with you and connecting with you. And I want to encourage everyone to certainly check out the documentary, to surround yourself with your favorite songs, with your favorite vibrations. And yeah, you can certainly check me out, Dr. Paul Amonte on Facebook. The Edgar Cayce A.R.E page. So every Wednesday morning, I do those Wellness Wednesday videos. You can also check me out on YouTube. I have a whole Heal Thyself series. And certainly with regards to the content, so I do webinars, I do continuing education videos. If you really want to know more about Edgar Cayce, come on down and check out our school here in Virginia Beach, where we offer virtual classes as well as in-person classes now. So anyone who wants to learn the hands-on healing methods of Edgar Cayce, check out edgarcayce.org, check out the Cayce Riley Massage School. And if you ever want to come down for a treatment, I practice here at the A.R.E Health Center. I'll see you then.
Yeah, and Dr. Monte, you've got all these videos, which I talked about in the beginning, but I mean, they range from breath work to exercises to diet to the violet ray. So there's so many different things out there to check out. So again, and I will include all of this in the body, the description here, all the different ways. So if you're watching this, you can always go to the body. What was that again? It's right there for you. And the folks at the A.R.E, I mean, I am so appreciative of them, and they work so hard so that we can all learn more about Edgar Cayce and the gifts that he put out there for us to embrace. So thank you so much. I mean, the folks at the A.R.E are so exceptional, and I am so thankful just to be a very small part of that from time to time. So very much. So thank you for sharing time, space, and energy with me. I know your schedule is crazy, so thank you for taking time out. I really appreciate it. And I think I'm doing something with you guys in the fall, so maybe the next time we connect, it will be in person.
Yeah, I saw your things coming up in August, right?
I think
Or November.
I think November. I think it's
No, that's right, November. That's right.
yeah. Right now it's day by day. So, but yes, I think it is November. But all right. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.